For those of you that have been here for a little while, you know that I have transitioned my channel from kind of cooking, eating, gluten-free, dairy-free to retirement. But I've never really shared how I got here and how my channel has evolved into now discussing topics like retirement, disability, not having any savings, frugal living. So I thought we'd go back to kind of how it all started and how I got here. Now, obviously, making videos like this are vulnerable. They're sharing a side of your life that sometimes are even hard to accept and come to terms with yourself, let alone sharing them with an audience out on the internet. But I thought if my story, and I think everyone has an important story, resonated with someone, encouraged someone, was relatable to someone, then it was beneficial to post on the internet and share my story. So, my name is Deb. I just turned 59 years old. In the last 3 years, I have moved forward with medical retirement, have been deemed disabled, and have no retirement savings. You know, kind of like everyone, you think you're going to have time. But I'm not sure I was ever in the mindset of, oh, it's something I'll do tomorrow, or it's something that I'll have time for. I lived so much of my life in survival mode, in a state of fight or flight, that having vision for the future, planning, financial stability, I'm just not sure it was ever something that I thought I would get to, but it also wasn't anything that I worried about. I grew up on a small farm in eastern Canada from immigrant parents who moved to Canada after World War II. I started working on the family farm at age 6, or the summer I turned 6, since my birthday is in the summer. So technically 5 years old. And that was my life. Maintaining the farm, helping maintain the farm, being a laborer, even as a really small little girl. And once I started school, I recognized really quickly how having immigrant parents that spoke a different language, how being committed to farming until I was done of harvest and was exempt from school till harvest was complete, how all of those differences set me apart from my schoolmates, from people within my community, from trying to make friendships, to even gaining employment and education later in life. I found that there was a lot of resentment from people within my school because they really felt that I was privileged because I had to work up until October on the family farm bringing in harvest. Now, I was still responsible to get all my schoolwork done. And, you know, as a child, having to try and maintain schoolwork and maintain working on a farm, you know, it's a lot. It's a lot for an adult, let alone for a child. But that resentment between schoolmates created a lot of animosity, created a lot of bullying. You know, you're a rich girl, you're a bitch girl. That song by Hall & Oates that people used to play around me, and felt that in some way I was incredibly privileged. And in a way, I guess I was privileged to be able to have a home and food on the table and things that I needed to be able to sustain life. But outside of my family home, life was hard. It was hard to integrate. It was hard to be relatable. If I had friends that come over and visit me and they would hear my family and my parents talk a second language in my home, oh my gosh, it was like, yeah, they would run home and like never come back again. It was just like, wow, they don't speak English in Deb's home. I didn't understand a word they were saying. And I would try and translate for them and put their mind at ease that there was nothing being said that they should feel self-conscious about or worry about. But needless to say, friendships were hard to come by. Maintaining friendships were hard to come by, fitting in. And in the end, the only thing that ever got me to school was sports and sporting activities. And then, you know, once I moved on with my life and had a family, I found it very difficult to be emotionally regulated. I was never really taught how to manage finances, how to budget, how to manage my emotions, how to communicate effectively with other adults, how to remain calm in situations. Everything in my life was at Mach 12. It was fight or flight. It was living in fear and living in just a lot of chaos. So, over my lifetime, while trying to raise a family and develop adult relationships, that was an incredible struggle. I am a mom, a single mom of 4 beautiful children. And with my whole life being in fight or flight, trying to survive and raise my kids, it just thinking about retirement, putting away for retirement, saving, I was just trying to wake up the next day and make sure that I tried to be a good mom to my kids. And I still have a lot of chaos that really affected my relationship and how I treated my kids and what I was taught. And I'm definitely now like working really hard on myself to be a better communicator, to be a better human, and to try and figure out, you know, how I got here and how I can move forward. So needless to say, being a single mom of 4, there was just never ever any money to put away for retirement. I also struggled with being able to get employment, being able to maintain employment. Most of my lifetime, it was living paycheck to paycheck. I had to utilize food banks and social programs and the kindness of others to get through. And eventually, learning later in life that, like a lot of adults, I think that are Gen X and grew up in the latchkey age where you spend a lot of time just looking after yourself, I was diagnosed with ADHD, which then obviously explained a lot of things, why my ability to communicate with adults, how my emotional dysregulation, being able to get and maintain employment and look after everything was just such a huge struggle. So in January of 2023, everything came to a head. I'm not sure necessarily what triggered it, but by July of, I think, 2024, between learning disabilities, some horrific life events, and a car accident, was deemed disabled and no longer to work at any job. Now what? I have no retirement. I'm 59. What am I going to live off of? How am I ever going to get employment? How am I ever going to support myself? How am I going to survive through this? Because one thing about being on disability in Canada, no, I'm not destitute. I can afford to pay my bills because I'm very lucky to be grandfathered into an apartment where my rent and heat is included for only $880 a month, which right now is affordable. But one thing people don't tell you, or that you don't realize, is that once you're deemed disabled and unable to work, once you turn age 65, in the eyes of the government of Canada, you are no longer disabled. That disability no longer exists. All of the benefits you paid into through your employment, that you get through your long-term disability program, and that sustain you into your vulnerable elder years, disappears the day you turn 65. And for some reason, the government of Canada thinks that if you get 70% of a really good government job as disability benefits, that your old age security and CPP are going to end up sustaining you once you turn 65. But with someone who's had ADHD, who's struggled with adult relationships, maintaining employment, and never worked for half of her life because she couldn't keep employment, I haven't paid into the system. I haven't sustained enough Canada Pension Plan benefits that are going to put me anywhere near being able to sustain my life. So then, once I'm 65, deemed disabled, struggle with ADHD and learning disabilities and communication and maintaining work, and when I'm at my absolute most vulnerable and old, and also facing potentially ageism, I'm going to have to try and find some kind of employment because I will not be making enough money to live. And it is really hard to stay focused on not thinking 6 years from now and the possibility of being homeless, the possibility of maybe having to live in my car, rehome my cats. What am I going to do? I try not to get in that mental trap, but I tell you, if you are a human on this earth, you definitely feel the weight of the world, especially now with everything being so incredibly expensive. The fact and the reality that 6 years from now, you could be out on the street. So I thought I would share my story. I thought it might resonate with someone out there. I thought maybe you personally, or you have someone in your life that has a similar story. And if you do, please share in the comments down below. Let me know how you're navigating late in life, learning disability diagnosis, deemed disabled and not being able to work at a job, and how are you going to navigate being able to afford things and live life? What's your plan? I'd really love for you to share some ideas, because Lord knows, if there's a side hustle out there, you name it, I've tried it. And with my recent accident, it just even hits home all the more of the reality of my situation. And you know, it's a little terrifying. But if there's any part of my story that has resonated with you, that you may find helpful. If you have any advice that you would like to share with me on how to possibly work my way into some kind of savings into the next 6 years, or how to emotionally and mentally regulate myself to be able to handle this situation, I would really, really appreciate your feedback. And thank you everyone for tuning in. And I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.